Saee, hello. Thank you for
Hi,
being here.
nice to be here.
You were born in Tehran, studied in Florence, and worked between Los Angeles, Beijing, Paris. I can guess that borders for you are only a geographical matter. Which is the influence of these countries in your architecture?
Obviously, the country where you're born is a big influence. The mother country. Basically, every work I do, in fact, has influences of all three in some ways. In Italy, I learned how to respect history, understand culture, understand the meaning, real meaning of architectural tradition, and Los Angeles gave me I would call it, Los Angeles gave me the wings to take chances and fly and not be afraid of taking chances with my work. When I look at my work, analyze it, I see the Iranian influence, I see the Italian influence, I see the American influence, and that's why I like so much to travel and work abroad, because the culture today is more of a global culture. We live as we know, we live locally, but we work globally. I think architecture today is local and global. The concepts of context that at one time or another we were tied to don't exist anymore. Architects that one day were used to the limitations that sort of the context of the city or the neighborhood or the architecture of that particular area was influencing them. Now they are communicating through a global network, and they see each other's work and get influenced by it. They interact with each other. They lecture through internet and they talk to another. So the communication system has become global, and respectfully, that has influenced everything we do. The way we design, the way we draw, the way we work has become more global.
Let's talk about your project. In 2004, Publicis store represented the first contemporary building on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. And it looks like an explosion of volumes, but it is a refurbishment of an old building. Would you like to tell us about the genesis of this project?
That was an incredibly important project in my experience in the last 10-15 years, in fact. Publicis company now considered the third largest advertising company in the world. The building is, their headquarters in Paris is on the second ring around the Arc of Triomphe. The original building was a Haussmannian building, was a turn of the century building which burned in 1970. At that time, all the buildings in Paris have a similar style. They're this glass facade. They are very introverted. They don't interact with the street. They don't interact with the context of the city. So that's what I found. In fact, that was the challenge of this project. When the competition was organized by Publicis, in fact, the facade was not included in the requirement of the competition. And I was the only competitor who proposed the facade, because I said that this building needs this change. When we started looking at the building, we started looking at how in the architecture of global architecture today, we're going to respond to a building on the Champs-Élysées near the Arc of Triomphe. What are the ideas that we have to develop in terms of materials, in terms of shapes, in terms of interaction with the street and people. So all of those influences were involved in my design process. And it took about 4 years from the competition to the conception of the project of being built to realize that.
I think also the construction was not so easy to carry on, because it was really innovative, this project.
The CEO of the company, Mr. Maurice Levy, he had a very specific requirement for the project. He wanted the project to be exceptionally well made. So structurally it was very challenging The glass facade that we created was of a special glass which is called the low iron crystal glass. So it's not green like a typical glass. The iron content of it is low. We use an interlayer to laminate the glass. The glass was from France and then was bent in Barcelona and then assembled in Germany. So it was a European project overall. I wanted at a certain time of the day this glass to evaporate, not be there. In fact, if you're there for the entire day, or you see it in different times of the year, the glass, because of the quality of the glass, the nature of the curved glass, especially the way it captures the reflections and light. So from one angle, you might look at it and you see very little of it. It's like almost doesn't exist. And then as you walk towards the Arc of Triomphe, or you walk down from the Arc of Triomphe, the way you look at the building and you turn, and then the reflections change. The glass starts to become from transparent to more of reflective to opaque. You almost like you don't even see beyond the layers of glass. And then the glass behind the new facade is another mirrored glass. So there is the reflection of that and interaction of the two facades, which was very critical for us. Because ultimately what I wanted was that these two architecture, or the architecture that I'm creating for the building and the existing architecture can coexist, can live together respectfully and be sort of help each other's, not fused together as one, but be distinctly separated but interactive with each other. And as the time would change towards the night, then there were these lights, the fiber optic lights that had to light up the facade, but not in a very, sort of commercial, loud way, but it was supposed to be very pristine and simple. So the facade has become an instrument that the company is communicating with the city, is communicating to the Paris and Parisians, but at the same time is communicating to Europeans as to establish themselves as a communication and advertising company that they are.
Another one of your famous projects is the Nescafé cafes. Also, this project can be defined as a way to communicate a brand with architecture. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with this?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a very good observation. Architecture, as long as its existence, has been representatives of its benefactors, of its makers, etc. In terms of the Café Nescafé, the Nestlé company wanted to build these cafes all over Europe. So they made this competition, which we won for the one in Paris. So we designed the building, their flagship, and was a small little space that we had to design. So we designed a new glass terrace, which was in the same tradition of the Paris terrace, but different. In fact, was the first one with a different shape that the city was presented to. And they were very, very positive about it. They said, well, we welcome this kind of innovation in the Paris terraces, because they're all, as you know, they're all very similar to one another. We designed the building, the architecture of it, the graphics of it, up to the cups and plates and bags and T-shirts. We really carried through the whole branding idea from the architecture to the cup, or architecture to the napkin. That's what we kind of quote unquote called it, that we designed everything from the napkin to the building.
Talking about your Shanghai project, the aquarium, I would like you to explain us, to answer us to the question you underlined as the starting point of this project. Can a monument be as powerful as an icon?
When the client came to us for this project, his requirements was like, I am situated next to the Pearl Tower. The TV Pearl Tower, as you know, is one of the icons of Shanghai. Here, I want the people who come to Shanghai come to this building not because this is only the aquarium, the only aquarium, like the largest aquarium in Asia, but I want the people to come to this site because of its building. I want the building communicate loud and clear that here, we are different, we are special, and we are here to stay. So when we started with looking at this building, we were under this kind of pressure. How can we make a building become a monument at the same time dealing with, very specific programmatic needs? It's an aquarium ultimately. It's a piece of technological innovation. It has to work well, it has to function, it has to accommodate a lot of services, etc. So it was creating this balance back and forward. So when we designed the building, when we were designing the building, we were thinking about the color. That's the color issue was one of the critical part of it. How can it become a color that would suit the shape or the architecture of it, but at the same time can have this presence on the site? And after a lot of debates and being in China, of course, was an influence. The color red starts to become more and more appealing. And but the part that is ultimately surprised me always is that when we presented this building to the owners, their board of directors were there, and one of the members of the board said, "How did you come up with the idea of the dragon?" And I looked at it, I'm like, I didn't even know anything about this. Then he showed me on the architecture, he said, "Here, this is the head of the dragon, this is his wings, and this is he's flying out of the water." And when I looked at it, then I saw it for the first time. This was not part of our intentions or part of our design, but all of a sudden I saw what he saw, and it was an additional surprise. And I didn't deny or accept that this was a dragon or not, but I said, well, this is a very interesting observation. But in fact, if you look at the design, you will see it. It looks like a dragon flying out of the water. And his comment was, it's very feng shui that is flying out of the water, because if it was flying into the water, it would have not been correct.
This is one project you have in China, but you realized several interesting buildings, such as the museum in Beijing. Mm-hmm. Would you like to tell us?
The museum of Beijing was quite a coincidence. This antique dealer who I met through some friends and connections, he buys old buildings, like Qing Dynasty buildings from different provinces in China. When I met him, he had 3 of these buildings just arrived from Anhui province in China. And he didn't know what to do with it. He had a big piece of land and he wanted to realize it into some form of a project. So I proposed this project to him. I said, well, this would be an interesting museum. And instead of cutting these into pieces, let's put 3 of these buildings on your land, build them completely, and then build a building around them to make them into a museum. So this is how this project began, and was an incredibly amazing experience, because to see these buildings, that they are all joint connection. That's why you could actually dismantle them. They're all wood connections, joineries, and then all the beams are the same, all the columns are sitting on stone pedestals, etc. So there's a system to it. For almost a year, we were just building the existing buildings on the site. Then we started building the building around it. So for that project, I had this concept that I didn't want the buildings to become rooted in Beijing because they didn't really belong to Beijing.
Oh.
They were belong to Anhui. So I kind of took that direction that I want to preserve these buildings. I want to see them as museum pieces. So these buildings, even though they're real buildings and you can live in them or you can use them, I don't want them to become grounded. So at any time you can imagine lifting these buildings up, dismantle them and taking them even back to where they came from.
Your architecture is very simple in this case. Normally you design more complex buildings. Well, what is interesting is there's something like a box.
Exactly. I like complexity. I like formal interactions. But in this particular case, the existing buildings are so rich with formal movements and textures and colors. So I wanted to completely be passive against them. You know, I was like almost like appreciating them. So I want the people to appreciate them, not the architecture of mine, architecture of a certain era.
What does innovative materials means for you?
Materials play an extremely important part of architectural language. We all of us have like this relationships with materials, which is critically important. Depends where you were born and where you grow up. I have developed an interest in ceramics in the recent years, and I have not really been able to design anything with ceramics, specifically with the ceramics, but now I think it has been developed considerably, and there are the ceramic tiles or ceramic surfaces, you know, the thicknesses are changing and becoming more adaptable, the sizes are growing, and the type of, in fact, I saw this material which each tile in fact is different from the next, and they all have different textures or different colors, which maybe 10 years ago it was not possible to achieve, and today actually we can do them.
I have my last question. Could you describe your architecture in only one statement?
We live in architecture, we grow in architecture, we die in architecture. So I see architecture as a container of consciousness, a container of consciousness that represents not only the architect or the designer's concepts or ideas, but ultimately inherits the users, the people who actually live, grow, and live in those buildings. It takes part of them and makes it part of itself as well.
I think this is a very good vision.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.